Gordon, and then there we go. Hi, and welcome to the F Word. I'm your racing driver and host, Danielle Sutton, and I'm exploring the world of extremely fast females. This episode, I'm delighted to introduce Mandy Hickson, who is an ex-RAF pilot, fast jet pilot. So, Mandy, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Certainly. So, hi, Daniela. Firstly, I love the title of your podcast, which is great. I mean, who would have thought it, the F word? Actually, with a clever spin on it, so to speak, which is great. So, a little bit of my background. I was in the Royal Air Force. I served for 17 years in the full-time reserve, and then 8 years as a reservist. Flew the Tornado GR4, which think Top Gun. It's a fast jet, sort of a little bit like the F-15 equivalent. And yeah, and I sort of saw active service over flying over Iraq as well during the Gulf War conflict.
Okay, so you mentioned Iraq. So my dad was actually on Operation Telic in 2003 in Iraq. He served, which is quite close to my heart. He served in
Yeah.
the logistics corps in obviously around that time. So can you tell us a bit about like your experience being on the front line in warfare?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's different for everybody. And I think depending on where you're based and what you're doing. So I was over there from 99 to 2003. Just when Gulf War Two started, we had just come back. So we missed Gulf War Three. Sorry, Gulf War Three. We missed Gulf War Two, which was Operation Telic. So when your dad was out there, I'd have just come back, unfortunately. So we actually missed in that one. But what we were doing was defending the no-fly zone over southern Iraq. So we were based in Kuwait, and we would fly on a daily basis, either as a show of force or we were sometimes targeting missions, perhaps if to suppress their buildup of their enemy air defenses, basically. And yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting time period. I mean, I was shot at by surface-to-air missile on one occasion, which locked onto the heat of my engines. It was sent up in a heat-seeking mode, fortunately. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here to tell the tale. I managed to evade it. And yeah, we saw some pretty dangerous missions that we were involved in when we were due to head up much further north, perhaps just south of Baghdad, where we were due to target a fiber optics building because they're about to basically put all of our intelligence under the ground by developing their fiber optics telecommunications systems. So yeah, we had a whole range of different targets, and that was my role out there as well. That and reconnaissance as well.
So how long did it, obviously, because that sounds like quite a lot, it's obviously must have took quite a long time to train for that.
Yeah.
So were you during like basic training, were you trained specifically for that and how did it work and everything?
Yeah. So I can talk you a bit through the training. So for anyone that's interested in doing this, I started off flying when I was 13, but at that stage of life, women weren't allowed to be pilots in the Air Force. So I'd chosen a career that didn't exist. But I chipped away at it. I took every opportunity that was available to myself at school, every leadership position from, prefix up to head girl. I was a real joy. I joined all the different clubs outside. So I was in the Air Cadets, I was in the Guides, which ended up become the Rangers. Did my Duke of Edinburgh award scheme. So I did all of those sorts of things because I felt it would put me in a good position if they did change the rules. And I gained a flying scholarship. From that, I got my private pilot's license. So I'm now 17 and I can fly an aeroplane before I can actually drive a car. And then I went off to university and I joined the University Air Squadron, which is like a continuation of the Air Cadets. And I continued to fly with them. And it was in my second year at uni, they changed the rules and I applied. And I eventually got in. I failed all the tests initially, but again, perseverance, got in. And it took me nearly 4.5 years to reach the front line. So it's a little bit like doing medicine, a 5-year degree type thing. So that was the sort of time period that it would be taking. It can go up or down dependent on how many people are going through the system at the time. And you start by flying something that goes at about 120 miles an hour. For myself, that was called the Firefly. And then you progress after that when you would go on to myself, it was called the Tucano. It's now the Texan. That goes at double the speed, so 240 to 300 miles per hour. And then if you pass that course, you will be streamed to fly fast jets, and you would then go and fly the Hawk, which is based at RAF Valley in Anglesey. And that the hawk goes at it's what the red arrows fly. So many people have seen those displaying at air shows, and that now goes in the sort of speed range of 420 to 500 miles an hour. And when you pass that course, then you get streamed to fly the fast jets that are on the front line. So for people now, that's the Typhoon or the F-35, the Lightning, and they're going at a lot of, well, let's just say faster than that even. So the Tornado, I think, is going. It can certainly fly up to Mach 1, and you're breaking the speed of sound. And the jets that are around at the moment are certainly doing that quite easily.
So that sounds quite interesting. So what's the quickest you've actually been then in an aircraft?
It was actually in a Tornado F3, I hate to which is the fighter variety. And I was on a training sortie with a colleague, and we were sort of fairly low level over the sea, and we basically explored the envelope. We went up to about 1.2, so 1.2 Mach. And the bizarre thing is that people sort of hear this big boom, and they think like think back to Concorde days and hearing this this breaking the sound barrier. When you're actually in the aircraft and you're flying it, you only have one indication that you've broken the speed of sound, and that is the Mach meter. And all it does is that you see it's gone through Mach 1. You don't notice it because that boom is happening behind you. So it's not like you get this bolt and you're shaken or anything like that. You're simply, yeah, going pretty damn fast.
Yeah, so that's quite interesting. So, of course, you experience quite a lot of G forces when pulling like vertical maneuvers and stuff. So
Yeah,
in F1, drivers can experience around 6 Gs under
yeah,
deceleration, braking, and cornering. And I've read that fast jet pilots can experience around 9 Gs sometimes in
yeah.
some scenarios. So, what's it like to actually experience that?
Well, 9G is pretty brutal. So fortunately for the Tornado GR4, which was the one that I flew, you wouldn't really be experiencing really, huge amounts of G-force, particularly because you were often carrying weapons, fuel tanks, and all of those things that hang off it limit how much G you can pull. So I think a typical turn, you'd be basically pulling up to about 4G. Now, what you're wearing is a G suit, which I don't believe they wear in Formula One cars. And the G suit is basically like a pair of cowboy chaps, if you can imagine, like they're sort of like these trousers, and you wear them on your lower half. Well, we did in the Tornado, in the Eurofighter, in the Typhoon and Eurofighter, the sorry, oh God, complete the Typhoon. They basically wear a G suit on their upper body as well. And what it is these tiny pockets of air, these like cushions effect. And when you wear them, it's plugged into the anti-G system of the aircraft. And as you pull G force, these little pockets of air expand and they compress around your arms and around your legs, and they prevent the blood from pooling in your extremities. So if they're stopping it from getting into your legs and your arms, it's keeping it in your central position and therefore keeping it more likely to be in your head. Because if you don't wear those and you suddenly snap a huge amount of G force, what often happens is you go into G-induced loss of consciousness. So G-lock, which can be really, really dangerous if you're flying. And I've experienced that once before. But 9G is, they say it's your body becomes the same weight as a Formula One car. So
Mhm.
that's how heavy you are because you are quite literally pinned in your seat. And I was doing some trials where they kept on putting me in this spiral down turn. We were hitting like constant 9G, and they were going, and just look over your head. I was like, I can't move my head. I'm literally like stuck in position, really worried that you're going to strain and damage your neck actually. So it's
Yeah.
pretty tough.
So do you train as a fighter pilot? So in F1, the drivers train extensively for their fitness to actually withstand the forces of the Gs. So do you have a specific fitness regime that you stick to as a pilot, or?
Well, they've got much better at that now because, to be honest, when I was flying them, which I qualified 25 years ago on type, which it just makes me feel so old. Um, Actually, there was nothing really around. There was sort of like, oh, some of us were into our fitness. I was always into my fitness, but there was definitely nothing for let's go to the gym. And if you watch what they're doing in the gym now for Formula One drivers, they're doing sort of weights with their neck. they're actually sort of strengthening the muscles around the neck. We didn't do anything like that. We had this annual fitness test, which was like a bleep test, and it was like, and with a few press ups and sit ups thrown in, and it was like crack on. But no, they've got much, much better than that because quite a lot of people, of course, suffered from neck injuries as a consequence of pulling G-force. And if you, it wasn't quite as bad for the pilot because you knew what was coming because you're flying it. But if you were sitting in the back seat an observer or weapon systems operator or navigator, and your head was down looking at a map, and then suddenly the pilot in the front pulls a lot of G, and if you're in the wrong position, you could be seriously damaged, from your neck and your back. So you have to be really careful.
Yeah, of course. Like you mentioned with the weights and everything, like I go to the gym as a racing driver and do
Yeah.
a lot of cardio fitness just to withstand
Yeah.
whatever gets thrown at me because if you're fitter in your body, then you can be fitter in your mind when you're racing. Um,
Yeah, completely. And how much sort of G-force would you experience in the driving that you do?
so in karting, I think I've seen someone pull up to about 2Gs round a race
Okay.
circuit, which is
Yeah.
I think it's probably more than what we pull in cars, just because we have suspension in cars
Yeah.
that cushions the braking, acceleration, the impact, and everything like that. But in karting, there's no suspension. It's just
Gosh,
um,
that's quite bumpy, isn't it? Yeah.
so when you're going over curves at like 70 miles per hour in a car,
Wow.
it's a lot less than going over a curb at 70 in a car.
And
Um,
what's your max speed then that you would do in a kart?
so in a cart, I think I've pulled around 70 to 80 miles per hour.
Wow.
In
That's
a car, around 110 miles per hour.
wow.
Um,
On a
but
track.
yeah, so I think 110 miles per hour around Snetterton, which
Okay.
has the longest straight in the UK. So you go
Wow.
down the straight, and it's just like it takes forever to get down that straight. But especially if you're behind another car, then you can pull about 110 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Also at Thruxton as well, that has actually, I might tell a lie, I think Thruxton might have the longest straight, but it's not very straight, it's kind of bent.
Yeah. I
um,
used to fly from Brixton actually and used to watch them all racing around the track
yeah.
beneath me actually when I was flying.
Where were you based then when you flew over?
Boscombe Down. So we weren't that far from Thruxton. So I used to go flying. We had a contract there, and I could go flying with them. But I did a race day the other day. Actually, it was my son's 21st, and so I treated him to this like a three-car racing experience. And we went to an old disused airfield to do it. And I can't remember the name of the car. I'm terrible, but I think it was a Mazda of some sort, and it was really unusual. And the guy said, and I was going down this straight, and and I was like really like laughing, going, "Oh my God, this is great fun." He goes, "No, no, no, the turbo's not kicked in yet." And I went, "What?" And we were already doing like plus 90-ish. Hit the turbo. He just said, keep your foot depressed. And this turbo kicked in and I was like thrust back. And I said, "Oh my God." He goes, "Yeah, apparently it's just like taking off in a fast jet." And I sort of went, "Yeah, it's not that dissimilar." And he went, "What?" I said, "Oh, I used to fly them." And he was like, "Oh my God, you could have told me." So it was really funny. But my God, I couldn't take the smile off my face. I mean, it's very different doing that sort of speed on the ground compared to in the air.
Yeah, of course, because you have all the bumps and everything on the road, whereas
Yeah, of course you do.
yeah. So is there like obviously you see in like Top Gun and everything there's a hard deck, so you can only go like a certain speed when you're at a certain altitude. Is it similar to that in actual flying?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, if you're doing air combat, which is what you would see them doing in Top Gun in the films, where they're actually like one aircraft that is like 1v1 or 2v1, that hard deck is really, really important. That's your safety base. And it's basically as if saying, you know what, we're going to put in this false hard deck of, say, 3,000 feet, and we want you to imagine that that is the ground. And if you go below it, you potentially, because what you need to give yourself is a pull out. And if you're doing even aerobatic maneuvers and things like that, you'll have these what's called gates. So you could be up at 5,000, and that will be your gate, which will give you enough height to pull out of that maneuver if you're on speed. At that height, and you'll know it take you to say 2,000 feet to pull out that maneuver. So yeah, we do talk a lot about we have a safety altitude. So if you're ever doing any aerobatics or anything, we use what's called the safety altitude, which uses the height of the ground plus potentially say 2,000 feet, depending on what you're doing. If you're spinning, you might add plus a bit more as well. So yeah, we do build in and factor in, so it's incredibly safe to be doing what we're doing.
Yeah, so and then obviously the speed, you can't break the sound barrier over at a certain
Overland,
altitude
no,
over land as well, can you?
no. And to be honest, you don't normally do that anyway. I mean, I've done it to give you perspective in 25 years of flying within the Air Force. I've only done it twice, and it's just because we could. So it's not something that you would do ordinarily, and you're limited to certain speeds. I mean, if you're flying low level, for example, excuse me, over Wales, you'd be limited and say, you can't go faster than 420. You can accelerate to up to 500 knots, because we're of course talking knots, which is similar to miles per hour, but you can add a little bit more if you convert it. So, yeah, I mean, you're normally not going much faster than that. But if you're doing flying perhaps in Canada, in more deserted areas, then you can, actually go a bit faster as well.
Well, where's like the furthest you've been from the UK, like based? So obviously you said you were based in in Iraq, and you've just mentioned Canada as well. So were you based in Canada at any point, or?
Yeah, so you will do detachments all over the world, basically, because there's only so much practicing that you can do flying in the UK's green and pleasant land. If you're fighting in a war in a hot desert, arid, very hot temperatures, it's got, very different sort of dynamics when you're flying. You need to practice in those areas. So we were deployed to Arizona desert to and a big exercise called Red Flag, which is flying out of Nellis Air Force Base, which is just outside Las Vegas. Tough job. Someone had to do it. And then we would also do what's called operational low flying. We would deploy over to Canada, where it's got a much less, inhabited areas. So you could be literally flying over forestry and you would not see another building at all. So you're not disturbing anyone to do that sort of practicing, because obviously the UK's got, a lot more higher density of population as well. So, yeah, and then I've flown out in Iraq as well and Kuwait. So yeah, that's that.
You mentioned before as well, like earlier on, that females actually couldn't get into the Royal Air Force as a fast jet pilot when you were younger and when you started flying at 13. I assume it was always your passion. So, what's it like being in a male-dominated um, workplace? Because obviously, racing is male-dominated as well. Do you have to like approach things in different ways, or how's it?
Yeah, it's a really so I talk a lot now, and I do a lot of keynote speaking. I speak to a lot of schools as well, and one of the things I would say is, it's really important. And the biggest lesson I learned, I think, throughout my entire career was be unapologetically yourself, because it's so easy just to, if you're in a very male-dominated environment, to completely mold who you are, to change your behaviors, to perhaps, give up on some of your values, and actually that's not what we're wanting. We don't want more people just to blend in. We want people who stand out and who are happy to be themselves, because there is a gulf between fitting in, which is where we constantly morph, and belonging. And I think when we talk about, culture has shifted so much in society as a whole as well, because people are willing to stand out and say, I'm happy to be different. And that is really good. And that's why I'm just so thrilled that we embrace that. And we've got so much more positivity around different peoples, be it their gender, be it their cultures, whatever it is, their belief sets. And I think that's so important because, if we got a more diverse population, then we're going to get different results as well. And I think if you just only recruit the same sort of people into, say, like the Air Force, then you're only going to ever have those same sort of people working there with the same ideas. And so, yeah, for years I did try and mold into being one of the guys. And then actually I realized I was never going to be that happy if I did that. But it takes a lot of character, and you've got to be quite strong in your own, in your own beliefs in who you are and confidence to say, actually, I'm happy to be me. I said in one speech, I think, it's happy to not be a man and be a Mandy.
I like that quote. Um, what else? So, in Top Gun as well, we mentioned Top Gun earlier. Maverick pulls off, he hits the brakes and flies right by. That's one of his famous
Oh
quotes,
yeah.
Tom Cruise. So does anything like that actually happen? Is that a legit maneuver or was it just for Hollywood?
I've never really seen anyone hit the brakes and they fly right by, but there are, I mean, a lot of the flying scenes are quite realistic. It's what the sort of training that you do. I did meet Tom Cruise. There you go. That's my name drop. In fact, yeah, surprisingly, my pinned post on Instagram is me meeting Tom Cruise. But no, it was great. And I was chatting to him. And when I went to see the movie, it was so funny because I went to see it with my son, who was 19 at the time. And he just said, Mum, it's not a documentary. Can you stop this running commentary? Well, that wouldn't happen. Well, that's not right. And I said to Tom, because he and I are obviously best friends now, I said to him, it's a shame that you won't ever be able to make another Top Gun Maverick because you've ejected too many times and you're now grounded in as far as the Air Force is concerned. And he said, I think you'll find it's called Hollywood. And I went, yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, I'll get back in my box, shall I? But yeah, no, a lot of the flying scenes were just brilliant. I mean, I absolutely loved it. You know, and it has, of course, got the sparkle of Hollywood on top of it, but that's fair enough, I think.
I mean, my dad introduced me to Top Gun, the original, which is actually my
Yeah.
favorite film of all time. When I was younger, when I was probably about six, he used to watch all the
Right.
old films with me, the ones that he
Oh, brilliant.
was younger. So like Rush, which is obviously a racing film by
Yeah.
us, and he'd watch all of these old films with me. So actually, I wanted to be a fast jet pilot in the RAF. It was my dream to be a fast jet pilot, but because of my juvenile arthritis, which we talked about earlier, that's a disqualifying factor, um,
Yeah.
medical grounds. So obviously, I don't complain because I'm now a racing driver, so I still get to go quite fast speeds on the ground, which is suits me perfectly. Speed is in my blood.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know, has there ever been any setbacks that you've experienced and influences in your life that led you to keep persevering and have that determination to carry on and lead your life?
Yeah. Absolutely. And well, role model wise, my grandpa was very influential to myself when I was growing up. And actually, he'd been a pilot in the Second World War, and he shared his stories with me. And then my mum encouraged me to join the Air Cadets, and that's when I sort of flew for the first time and loved it. And I think when I spoke to the pilot, I said to him, "Excuse me, sir, do you get paid for this?" He said, "It's my job, it's my career." And it was the first time I'd sort of put two and two together that you could actually do something as a career that you were passionate about, not just something that you had to go to work to get paid. And I think that's what really sort of, lit the fire to follow my dream as well. And also Top Gun as well was around as well in sort of, what was it, 86, which, I was 13 at the time when that was out. And so all of those coming together. And then when I applied to join the Air Force, I failed initially the medical because I was told I had an obesity problem because the height charts for women only went up to 5'8" and I was 6 foot tall. And so they said, oh, I should be 9 and a bit stone or something. And I was like, what? Then they said, yeah, how are you going to remedy your obesity issue? And I was thinking, crikey, I had to lose 3.5 stone. So I did it. I lost 3.5 stone in weight, cut a leg off, I think, basically was the only way. But I did that with a brutal diet when I was doing my A levels, lost the weight, got the flying scholarship, put the weight back on, thank goodness, became a normal weight again. And then when they changed the rules and allowed women to join, I applied and I failed every single one of the aptitude tests. So if it hadn't been for the boss of that university squadron saying, hold on a minute, Mandy's quite a good pilot, why can't she pass the tests? He didn't look at the tests and say, well, she's failed, so she's no good. He decided to challenge the Air Force on my behalf. And so, I had people who were behind me so much of the time as well. And, my mum would always say, and I think it sounds like your dad's been probably one of those supporters for yourself, is that, if it's going to be someone, why shouldn't it be you? And it was sort of a really nice way of framing it because, you always think, oh my gosh, the odds are so against me. There's no way I could do it. But actually, why can't it be you? Because if you're doing all the right things, yes, there might be a little bit of luck that's needed on the way, but ultimately, why shouldn't it be you? And I think it's about having that belief that you can do things, and and if you can facilitate that by doing things that put in place the steps to make it easy to achieve those goals. And so, yeah, I was very lucky to have that. And as I was going through flying training as well, I had some brilliant course mates who really helped me out as well. So that whole teamwork thing's really, really important. So I think it's about surrounding yourself with people who inspire you, who believe in you, and you can do that vice versa. We would call it the trusted wingman, or wingwoman, which is like I'll be honest, Danielle, and you reached out and asked me to come on this podcast. I don't always say yes to them all. And I thought, good for you. You're meeting people, you're hopefully going to inspire other people, and you're having the confidence to put yourself out there and do something different to hopefully reach a different audience. And, I've got a huge respect to you for doing that as well.
Thank you. And as you probably know, that the UK has just built two Elizabeth class aircraft carriers. And although these are great assets to the UK, do you think that AI and unmanned aircraft will roll out, or will your own role as a fighter pilot become a dying breed at some point, and the evolution of battle and the battle space will change to the point where flight will become unmanned in the future?
I think it's a really good question. And I think I mean, if you look at what we're doing perhaps in the Air Force at the moment under Space Command, we're looking at UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles all the time, the progression of drones. They're being used already in the workspace in battlefield management as well. And so, we are seeing people are now recruited to go in straight away as drone pilots. So you're not even going in as a pilot and then saying, "Oh, would you mind flying drones?" You are actually recruited knowing you will never actually step into an actual aircraft. And that suits some people as well. So we're going to see more and more of that. Of course we are, but they're very much looking at perhaps sort of combined airspace scenarios whereby you have perhaps one manned vehicle and then almost a formation of drones with you so that you've got somebody that's thinking, in that moment, in that exact space. But I think, of course, we're going to see huge advances in unmanned aerial vehicles all the time because we'd be crazy to not think that. And if you think you don't have to have a pilot who's A, in danger, and B, you don't have to put all of that technology of like the ejection seats, the weight, and all of those things to having a manned vehicle, then ultimately you're going to be able to carry a better payload and you'll be able to perhaps carry more fuel, perhaps more weapons, and all of those things that actually are going to make a difference. And you can fly those from the UK. You often only have one person in a theatre who is there for the takeoff and landing. The rest of it is completely flown remotely from the UK, or it was originally from America. So, yeah, we will see more and more of that. But I think it's interesting when you read that across to the commercial world. Would passengers ever be happy to fly with an unmanned commercial aircraft? Mm.
Yeah, but for now, we still have um, obviously we still have fast jet pilots, and
Yeah.
that's obviously really exciting for the people who want to get into that field. And obviously, here you are now, and you're doing motivational speaking now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
And
right. Yeah. I mean, I travel for the last 12 years. I left 12 years ago, and for probably the last 10 years, I've been speaking all over the world. Really busy, probably do two or three a week. And yeah, it's great. I travel a lot. I get to share my story. I have written a book, which, has sold about 35,000 copies, and that's been great. So a lot of young people have read that, and hopefully it's inspired them to follow their dreams, be that whether it's going into flying or going into whatever, but just doing something different and having that choice that's now available is fantastic. So yeah, I absolutely love the role I've got now.
well, Mandy, it's definitely been a pleasure to have you on this podcast. And hopefully, it can inspire more young people and young girls to feel a future in the Royal Air Force is for them. So, thank you so much. And this is the F word. Thank you for tuning in, and see you all next time.
Bye.